I definitely wanted to go towards a people-focused area of law. And I think that definitely comes from the work I was doing in theatre as well, working directly with people, managing people, listening to the needs of people and trying to, create cohesive, collaborative environments where everyone was happy and thriving. And ultimately that makes for a better show.
Hello, my name is Eline Perez and you're listening to Are You an Artist? Last episode of 2024 and guest number 50, Sophie George-Moore. It's about her journey from working in the world of theatre into law, writing an article and going to the supermarket with a suitcase. Yes, Sophie's life is fascinating, so here you go. Enjoy the last episode of the year. Thank you, Sophie. Dear Sophie, we used to work together behind the bar of Wilton's Music Hall, and here you are today, an official barrister specialized in family law, taking your own cases and writing articles. You also, beforehand, studied theatre and performance and worked as a theatre producer and manager in different places. So I am super curious about your life journey and how it feels to go from working in theatre into law. And very happy to have you as the last guest of 2024. Sophie, are you an artist?
I think it's a very broad question because my inclination at this present point in time is to say no because of the career choice I've made. But looking at my background, I have definitely been an artist at points. And I think that even in the career I'm currently doing, there is lots of scope for creativity. And actually, a huge part of the job is finding creative solutions to problems that need to be fixed and helping people in a way that maybe no one else has considered helping. And also being quite creative with your words at times. That's a big part of the job. There are a lot of situations I've already found myself in where you need to be quite careful about what you say and how you say it, not only for your client, but maybe as a way of communicating something to a judge in a way that is clear to them, that makes it less clear to other people what you're saying. And actually, I do think learning the law is like learning another language in a way. It's something that you have to pluck away at every day for a number of years to be able to really understand something that's quite abstract. And I think when I look back at how I approached things at the start of it and how I approach things now, there were things that I would look at and think, I don't even understand what this means. I've got absolutely no idea. And now I look at it, I'm like, oh, I know what the answer to that is, type of thing.
That's crazy.
So I wouldn't necessarily call myself an artist per se, but I do think that there is scope to be very creative. Is that the answer you're looking for?
Yeah, I think it's like super interesting because I was thinking, you have to be so creative to come with solution for things that maybe haven't been seen before. And I just studied law for a year in France, but I remember also there it was very codified. And we learned that here it's much more based on experiences. So you look back at what's been done and it's maybe a bit less, you don't have tons of quotes and articles and things. So
yeah, you're right, because you guys have a constitution.
Yeah.
And I mean, technically, we don't have a written constitution, but we have various statutes and things that provide specific rules. But you're completely right. We have a system whereby a lot of our laws come from case law, and that is developed through people's experiences, as you say, and judges decide, well, this should be the way forward based on this specific experience that I've encountered today. And that's really exciting because it's always changing, and new things happen and things develop. And you're right, it's those people who are very high up in the system who are sort of creating the laws of the land.
And so why were you interested in theatre before?
So I come from a family of exclusively creative people. My father was an actor and my mother was a ballet dancer. And all my dad's other children are actors. And I really just thought I didn't have anything else to do. I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll be an actor then. It was all I knew.
What have you done?
Yeah, it was absolutely all I knew. And I was just like, oh, I'd just be an actor. And I sort of grew up in theatres and on film sets and around other actors. And
how was that growing up in that kind of world? Because it's so different.
Yeah, it's weird because my dad was quite successful in the sense that he was always working. He always had a job. He had an agent and he'd just sort of say like, oh, I'm going to go do this now. And I was like, okay. So he'd be off and about all over the country, sometimes abroad, doing different bits of work. And it was just normal for me. Mm. And, you know, spending time backstage at theatres and meeting these other thespians and, you know, very fabulous people. I was just like, well, this is lovely, isn't it? And I thought, well, I'll just do this then because it just, look how easy and wonderful it is. And then I decided to do that at university. And pretty much the second I got to university, I realised that I'd had quite an obscured view of the profession, being that my dad was working all the time and he didn't really have to audition for stuff. And I looked at everyone around me and they were like, oh my gosh, I'm trying out for drama school. It's so stressful. I've got to do this, this and this, but I'm probably not going to get in. And I was sort of like, oh, that sounds really hard. I want to do something
End of
hard.
The fairy tale. It's so interesting.
Yeah. The fairy tale died very quickly. So I didn't do that. I obviously still did my degree, which was a performance degree, and I loved it. But I sort of started a theatre company with a few of my friends and became a producer that way, just sort of doing student productions. And then after I left, I got a job working for a festival, produced a few festivals and sort of started working for fringe theatres and other organisations producing theatre that way. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And no.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition. I think with theatre, I loved it while it lasted, but I found myself not being able to move forward with it. I really loved producing. I loved managing. I loved a lot of the work that I was doing. And I think I was actually very good at it. But I sort of found myself in a place where I couldn't progress much more with it. And I tried a few things towards the end of my career in theatre. I tried to get into casting. That was something I was really interested in doing, either in a casting department or as maybe an agent's assistant.
What did you like about it?
It's that working with people, I think. And, you know, having been on both sides, you know, understanding what the drive of an actor is, there is something quite nice about progressing someone else's career. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, you can be the one who actually make a change that makes them grow into a new work opportunity, I guess, or something.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's something that I was very interested in, and obviously loving watching people perform and thinking, wow, that person's got something really unique or special, or even just has like a really interesting look and they'd be great for that kind of role, or has a specific style of humour. So I was really drawn to that. But I found that I had a really mixed experience trying to get into it. And it was very all or nothing. I obviously had nearly a decade of experience behind me, and a lot of people I was interviewing with, some of them told me I was overqualified, and they were like, you're going to be really miserable here. So I'm not going to give you the job because you're over-experienced at this point, and this is really for someone who's just starting out. And then other people I was speaking to were like, you're going to have to answer the phones for a year. And I just thought, have you read my CV? I'm happy to start from a lower position. I'm not expecting to come straight in at, you know.
Yeah, but still.
And I was like, well, which one is it? Am I overqualified, or do I need to start, you know?
From nothing, yeah.
Exactly. And I was just like, I'm lost. I need to get out and figure out something here, because I don't feel like there's room for manoeuvre. So I took a leap of faith and I quit my job without having a job to go to. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, I'm going to find a temporary job and I'm going to use that time to figure out what I really want to do. And I'm still going to work hard and do my best, but really think about like what drives me, what I'm looking for, what I'm trying to achieve, those types of things. So I took a temporary job at a consulting firm, and it was completely different to anything I'd done before, much more corporate. Similar type of work in terms of like admin and things like that, but very different field. Fortunately, I met some amazing women there, and they're some of my best friends to date. So I think everything happens for a reason. But I was there for nearly 2 years, and during that time I thought, okay, I found law is something that I'm interested in. Can I do it? I think I'd looked into it a few times before, but as you know, being a self-deprecating woman, I'd convinced myself that I wasn't good enough. And there was no way I was going to get accepted onto a course or anything like that. And then I looked into it again and I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can at least do a graduate diploma, which is like a conversion degree. And if I don't, you know, it's just 1 year. If I like it, great, I can move forward. And if I don't,
that's all right.
It's okay. There's loads of other things I can do with it. It's not sort of a dead end degree. So that's how I found myself there. But then you have another conundrum with law in this country, and we have a very different profession here in the sense that most places, if you're a lawyer, you conduct litigation and you also go to court. But here we have a split profession. So you're either a solicitor or you're a barrister, and the solicitors are the lawyers that conduct the litigation. And if something needs to go to court, then you get a barrister.
Okay.
But if it doesn't need to go to court, you can end things with a solicitor. And that's the ideal situation. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily want something to go to court. So it's different in that sense. And then that was the next decision. Which one do I want to do? Mm-hmm. And actually, it was quite an interesting conundrum because I'd sort of developed skills in both. I'd trained as a performer. And obviously, I'm sure you don't need to stretch your imagination too far to work out which one of those two professions has more of a performative aspect to it.
Like the drama.
The drama. Do I want the drama or do I want a nice, simple, quiet life? Not simple, obviously. Solicitors have very grueling jobs as well. But I'd also worked as a producer for a number of years, and that is highly administrative. You know, I developed some quite hardcore administration skills as well. So I sort of had to consider which one of those two I would want to do more. And also in the knowledge that it's actually much harder to become a barrister than a solicitor, just purely on the basis that there are fewer spaces for people wanting to become barristers, so fewer training spots, whereas there are many, many, many more spots for aspiring solicitors. So just as a numbers game, it's easier to become a solicitor. That's not to say the work is necessarily any easier.
Yeah, but
it's a little bit less competitive. So I thought, okay, do I want to put myself out on a limb and potentially set myself up for complete rejection? Or do I want to do the route that actually I'm very much more drawn to? And I think the thought was, I don't mind working in an office 9 to 5. That's not a problem for me. But I'd been doing it for about 10 years, and I think I was ready for something a little bit different. So I took a bit of a leap of faith and decided to go down the other route.
Wow.
Yeah. And very fortunately, here I am a few years later, and it seems to have worked out. So I'm fine now, but it was a risk.
I kind of really love these little risks that you take. And
yeah.
When it works out, you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm still very surprised that it has worked out, but it has. And I'm very grateful that it has. I'm still training. I'm currently a pupil barrister, so I'm not fully qualified yet. But hopefully will be in a couple of months' time.
Wow, in a couple of months.
Yeah, hopefully.
Crazy.
Fingers crossed. If everything goes well.
And so do you feel like it's impacted the way you communicate also in your life?
Definitely. I find myself accidentally cross-examining people all the time.
Oh, wow.
It's not necessarily on purpose, but the great thing about it is people don't realise that you're doing it.
Great.
But, you know... It's not intentionally slippery of me, but like sometimes I'm like, oh,
You can't help it, I guess. Because
I will say that fortunately the situation doesn't arise too often, but you know, sometimes when you're trying to get an answer out of someone, you're like, well, is it this or is it that? Because it's not both things. And you're like, oh no, that's cross-examination. Maybe you should just be a bit more measured with how you're approaching things. It's funny because and I think I'm probably evidencing this a little bit right now, but advocacy is the main part of the job. You have to go into court and you have to advocate for your client. You have to develop submissions that are structured and present your client's case, but also deal with the points of law and, you know, for all intents and purposes, trying to persuade a judge why your client's position is the position that they should go for. Mm-hmm. And you do have to be very focused when you're doing that, because your advocacy can slip. You know, you can be less articulate if you're not focused. But I find sometimes in my day-to-day life, again, depending on my focus, I can be very articulate. And sometimes I'm like, what word am I looking for? Can someone help me out here? Really? No, it's not my day-to-day. So, yeah, I think it does. And I think also because it's quite a challenging job, there is the propensity to talk about work quite a lot. And I think that's probably really exhausting for other people who don't know what you're talking about. So I'm quite mindful of that and trying to not talk about it all the time. But it's a new experience for me, so I think it's okay to talk about things as well sometimes.
It must be quite intense also to go from the performance world and theater where it's like, it's not a big issue, you know, even if something doesn't work out. And now you're like really working for people, and people's life kind of depend on how it goes. And do you feel like you can manage the stress level or?
Yeah, I mean, it is a job that requires a lot of resilience. You're right in the comparison that you've made. And I actually think I made the same comparison in one of my application forms. You know, the work has real life ramifications. Like if you've got someone else's future in your hands a lot of the time. So yes, absolutely. You have to be really careful. And you have to be mindful. You obviously have to be objective, but you have to be mindful, especially in family law, not to be too objective, because it's a very emotive arena and people are suffering emotionally in those situations. So you have to be mindful not to just go in and be some sort of mindless law robot.
So do you have a kind of psychological training as well? Because
no, there's no psychological training. I think part of the recruitment process for the bar specifically, you know, not only are there fewer spaces for people who want to train as barristers, but there are a very rigorous set of skills that people are looking for, and resilience is probably the number one skill, because especially when you do things like family law or criminal law, maybe, where you're dealing with people every day. Unlike other areas of law, maybe you work in commercial law or environmental law, and of course there are still people that are impacted by those things, but you're not necessarily working with individuals on a daily basis. And they're looking for resilience because you're going to be not only in a job that's stressful in terms of the volume and workload, but you're going to be on the receiving end of people who are unhappy with outcomes. You're going to be on the receiving end of people who are dealing with really life-changing and emotional things. And you have to be able to manage it with obviously a degree of empathy, but not take things personally as well. And obviously you're going to go into court and you're going to lose all the time. It might be that you've just got a terrible case and there's no way of, you know, succeeding on it, or it might just be that you've not been as successful as persuading the judge. And I think I'm only about 2 months into taking my own cases, but that the ego part of that went out the window very quickly. I learned to stop taking things personally very fast. It was quite, I think that's the one thing I've really observed is like, wow, you're really not affected by whether, and that's not to say I don't care if someone.
But you're just letting go of this, ego thing.
I think so, yeah, because ultimately you can only do what you can do.
Yeah.
You can be the best advocate in the world, and a judge on that day is just not as persuaded by you as someone else, or something gets raised last minute that you didn't know about and it changes everything. So I think to that effect, managing people's expectations is a really important part of the job as well. Just sort of making people aware, this might go this way, this might go that way.
Just to let you know. And do you miss like working in theater or on set, or because it is such a different word?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the loveliest things about theatre is the sort of collegiate, collaborative, friendly environment. And there's definitely this idea of everyone being in something together and almost like an ensemble attitude. And everyone's sort of seeking the same things and knowing how hard it is to achieve what you're trying to achieve and being very supportive of each other. And yeah, I definitely miss that. And it's not to say the bar isn't supportive, but you're working on your own.
Yeah.
So there's less of that group mentality. So yeah, I definitely miss that. There's lots of wonderful things about theatre that I miss. As grueling as that job is as well, all the late nights doing tech rehearsals and getting a show together, there's some kind of joy in the celebration of putting something on and finishing a project as well.
Yeah.
And I do miss the environment of theatre too. It's always a lovely environment to be in. Obviously, Wilton's has a lovely energy to it. And I think it's a real testament to that sort of theatre vibe as well.
Yeah.
The atmosphere there.
Yeah, that's true. And do you know why you wanted to go more towards like family law?
Yeah, I considered going into criminal law. I think it's really interesting. I definitely wanted to go towards a people-focused area of law. And I think that definitely comes from the work I was doing in theatre as well, working directly with people, managing people, listening to the needs of people and trying to, create cohesive, collaborative environments where everyone was happy and thriving, and ultimately that makes for a better show. So I was definitely looking for a people-focused area of law. And I thought crime would be really interesting. And I still think that it would be really interesting. The reason I didn't go into crime is largely that as a woman who, was on my own, it's a very difficult area of law to make a living, to the point where, I don't know if you know about this, but there were barristers' strikes about a year and a half ago.
I didn't know.
I think they worked out that the criminal barristers are earning less than minimum wage at the time. Obviously, it's all publicly funded work because, people commit crimes. They're not expecting to necessarily be punished for those crimes. People get caught and they get legal aid. So it can be very challenging to earn a living as a criminal barrister. And, not only that, there's a huge volume of work. Like, you can be called on at 10 o'clock at night, the night before a case.
Oh, wow.
To go prosecute the next day. That means you're then up all night reading papers. And it's not to say that doesn't happen sometimes in other areas of law.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult. And I think I really have a lot of respect for criminal barristers because I know what drives them. I know why they want to do that work. It's the same reason I wanted to do it. It's working with people and being able to offer fair access to legal representation, everyone's right to a fair trial. And it's really interesting. But I had to consider, can I actually afford to do that? And I sort of thought, I'm not motivated by money. It's not about earning a lot of money.
But still, you need to...
But you need to be practical as well.
Yeah.
And at that point in my life, I didn't have any family support. There was nothing like that. And I just thought it could be a bit of a risk for me. So let's find another area of law that's equally interesting. So I basically went and did different experiences with different law firms and barristers' chambers to figure out what I want. And then I shadowed a barrister who was doing some family work, and I was able to sit in conference with him and his client, and just the way he was with this person and how difficult the situation was and how emotive the situation was and how many issues there were to be dealt with that were so personal and emotional and emotive. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And actually, I think there is massive scope to make a difference here. So very similar to criminal law. And of course, there's lots of areas of the law that are, all of my work presently is legally aided, and that's no problem. I would never not want to do legally aided work. I think it's really important to do that. But that you can also do some private work as well in family. So there is a tiny bit more of a support mechanism in place financially.
And you've also recently written an article.
I did. I wrote an article about financial remedies, family law.
How did you find this experience?
It was very interesting. Obviously, I recently did a case where that issue came up. And it's an interesting area of the law because it doesn't come up all that often. And I was working with a very senior barrister, senior in terms of her years of experience. And she herself said, I've not really come across this before that often. And now I've got 2 cases and it's come up. Let's look into it. So I did quite a lot of work for her on that. She then did a seminar on the topic and I wrote an article. It is essentially interim orders for sale in financial remedy proceedings, which is if you fancy falling asleep, you should read it.
I started to, and I was like, I know why I stopped studying law.
Yeah, if you're struggling with insomnia, definitely give it a read.
I will put the link in the podcast episode.
Oh, yeah.
But wow.
I mean, I will say that it's very much written for the practitioner and not for, people who aren't lawyers. And that's, not to, say that you can't read it, but it will be very boring.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm very fascinated by, I think in law, the precision of things and the wording, everything is just so precise. And yeah, that's why I'm just really, I admire you so much for now being a barrister. And I'm very curious when people talk also what you hear, and probably you have a different understanding also maybe because of the experience of working with different cases, with different kind of people, and you must meet so many people. And especially after your experience of working in the arts and being a producer. And yeah, you must have such a extended vision of the world somehow.
Yeah. I think it does require you to think quite broadly. And I still, obviously I'm coming into it a little bit older. I'm not just fresh out of uni. I've had a bit of a career. Whereas lots of people just go straight from school to uni to the bar. And I honestly don't know how people do it. I don't know how people do it without having...
some life background.
That's it. Yeah, life background and just additional experience. Obviously, it's a profession where there are lots of very, very clever people.
Yeah.
Not me. It takes me.
She's so clever.
Takes me quite a bit longer to train my brain to think ways that other people seem to be able to. I certainly could not have done it at the age of 22, fresh out of uni. But yeah, it does require a sort of broad outlook and having to factor in a lot of different things and considerations. And I think especially when you're working in a people-focused area of law, it requires you to really understand a lot of different types of people and people who aren't necessarily people from your group or your own experience. Yeah. And you've got to really be able to think inside someone else's brain and how they might be thinking or feeling. So I think it takes quite a lot of different skills.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes I feel like theatre or acting can be a bit of a bubble. It's kind of same people.
Yeah, it can be.
And yeah, I guess you're seeing real people.
Yeah.
Do you have inspirations or recommendations of, I don't know, some theatre that you've seen recently or book that you've read?
Oh my gosh. I have to be
music.
Perfect.
I think you know quite a lot about.
I do. I like music is something that makes me very happy and I listen to every day. I will be honest and say that I used to read probably about a book a week before I started learning the law. I haven't read a book for 5 years. Because I can't do any more reading. It's just not possible. And it's to the point where I'll pick up books and I'll read about a chapter or two, and then I'll just be like, I just can't do it right now. I think I'm halfway through a book that I was really enjoying, but you just get distracted and I'm like, I've done too much reading today. But yes, music is a source of enjoyment for me. Love music. I couldn't go anywhere without my headphones. I feel naked without them. I like a lot of different types of music. Yeah, give me a good melody or a good beat and I'm happy.
What's the last band that you've seen?
I went to see a band called English Teacher.
Oh, we talked about it yesterday at Wilton's.
Oh, yeah?
Wow.
They were very good. They've got a very cool female lead singer who's amazing. Actually, I think I've seen another band since then called Sancho, Panza, who were very good as well. But English Teacher was the last big show I went to, and they were very, very good.
Cool.
Very cool. I think they won the Mercury Prize this year.
Yeah.
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 So very up and coming. They're doing very well. And yeah, it was a great vibe. Great evening. And they had confetti cannons. So
that's
that
what we
always
want.
makes me happy.
Okay, little last random questions. What makes you laugh?
Oh, so many things. My friends, who are just the silliest people ever and say the strangest and most hilarious things I've ever heard that I wouldn't expect to hear from anyone. My boyfriend as well. Same answer. Sometimes I'm just like, where has that come from? Yeah, my friends and my boyfriend, both, hilarious people. And sometimes myself, but not because it's actually funny, but because it's like, for what reason did you do that?
Do you like to go to the supermarket?
Oh, do you know what? I was in the supermarket yesterday and I thought, I like this specific supermarket, but no other supermarket.
Okay, so which one?
It was the Waitrose in Wapping.
Yes, that's my favorite. I love it.
But do you know what's so funny? It's like, I mean, listen, I can't always afford to shop at Waitrose, but I was nearby and I wanted some specific cheese. So I thought, I'll see if they've got
Waitrose is for the cheese.
But I mean, if I could afford to, I would definitely do it. I won't lie to you. But I would prefer not to go to the supermarket. And I also don't have a car. So like when I go to the supermarket, if I'm doing a big shop, I will need to take a suitcase and I have no shame in the suitcase.
You have a suitcase to do your...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the thing is I would love to get one of those shopper trolleys that like you see everywhere, like people take to markets and stuff. But I'm just like, let's just take a suitcase because I've got a suitcase. But I'd rather not go. I don't know if you've ever been to the Waitrose in Canary Wharf, but it's horrific. It's so busy and you can't even move the trolley around and it's stressful and I don't want to be in there. But I was in the supermarket yesterday and it was just, it was midday on a Saturday. I thought it would be quite busy, but it was just calm.
Aww.
And it's big, but it's not overwhelmingly big.
Yeah.
So I like that supermarket.
Yeah, I really like this supermarket. Big up to Waitrose. Waitrose Wapping.
Just that one, yeah.
If you could live a parallel life, so you have your life, you have another one, what do you do?
I would travel the world. And I would try and visit all the countries. And
all the countries?
All the countries, yeah. Because it's a parallel life, so I've got all the time in the world, right?
I mean, okay, that's a rule I didn't plan, but...
That's the rule. That's the rule I have created.
You can choose
all the time in the world.
Little amendment on the rule here.
I would travel the world and I would try to meet as many different people from different cultures as possible and learn about different places and different people. And I would also like to, when traveling the world, go and experience different live music from all the different countries in the world.
Nice. Okay, maybe last question. What's your favorite food?
Oh, that is a really difficult
your last
question.
meal.
I know. Do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day and I was just thinking like, what's my favourite cuisine? But it's just so hard because there are just so many good cuisines. I can't commit to a meal. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. But like I do get quite addicted to various types of food and I'll go through phases. So I had a phase a few months back where like I just couldn't stop eating Indian food.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like I really craved it. Like I really could not go without having it every day. I was just like, oh, I don't know. There was something I was just like, I need that spice. I need this spice. I need this. And then I also had a moment recently with Italian food, and I've had it recently again with East Asian food, where I'm just like, I really crave the flavors and textures from different cuisines.
Oh, wow.
But I think if we're going to say one meal, we'll go for a roast dinner. I'm sure everyone you've interviewed has said the exact same thing.
No, actually, I think you're the first person talking about a roast dinner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a good old roast dinner. Can't go wrong.
Bon appétit.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Sophie. That's
Oh, no, thank you.
best episode ever. And last of the year. And you're the 50th guest.
Oh my gosh, what a great number. 50.
Wow, wow, wow.